Yo, what is going on YouTube? I am Germ here. Today we're going to be talking about some news that I was not expecting. This actually I thought was very, very interesting. And I think that you guys might be a little bit shocked and surprised by it as well. But I was glad that the tweet and the story came across my timeline because I don't think I get shocked or surprised all that often now that I've been doing this stuff for so long. What we're going to be talking about today is this, mostly about this tweet and then some articles and some other stuff and some research that I did. From esports charts at esports charts, based on the results of the first 3 weeks, LEC Summer 2022 has the lowest viewership in 2 years for the start of the season. Read on the reason for the downtrend and what could be done about it, and we will dive into this article a little bit, but this is very, very interesting to me because we always hear, and it's been very, very public, the downfall of the LCS over the past 3 years. Once upon a time, the LCS was, I don't know if it was the biggest league in the world, or at one point it was probably the biggest league in the world. I don't really know, the history of the LCK and the LPL all that well, or when they started, or how all the timelines line up, or whatever. But when you compare the LCS to the LCS, was very, very big, especially compared to the LEC. In a lot of ways, the EU LCS was seen as they were always pretty close to equals, but the LCS was kind of bigger, more extravagant, more money, more resources, all that stuff. The LEC has since kind of grown into its own beast, grown into its own monster. But we've heard all about the LCS and their declining viewership and how we can fix it and how it's an issue and how the LCS is dying and all this stuff. But to hear that now, so far into summer 2022, that the LEC viewership is also beginning to struggle is very, very interesting. And there is a lot of different things at play here. One, League of Legends isn't the game that it used to be, and I don't mean that in maybe the stereotypical way that everyone says it, like, oh, Season 4 was the best season, this new season sucks, or Season 2 or Season 5 or whatever was the best season, now the game sucks and everything sucks. Like, no, I don't think that. Overall, I think the game is still really, really fun. I still do enjoy the game. I think, they do a lot of things to improve the game year over year. There's a lot of issues and problems that they continue to ignore that I wish they would fix and wish they would make better and all that stuff, but I do still think League of Legends, is my favorite game of all time. I think it's an awesome game. I think it's a great game, but it's just maybe not as popular as it once was. I still think it's one of the biggest games in the world. I still know it's the biggest esport in the world, but there's more competition. There's more stuff going on. There's other big games out there, and games just kind of come and go in cycles, and I definitely wouldn't say that this is like the maximum peak of League of Legends around the world or anything like that, but yeah, kind of interesting that now the viewership woes of the LCS are carrying over to the LEC a little bit. And yeah, one of the reasons obviously being that this isn't the peak of League of Legends, so it makes sense. So we're not continuing to grow. And I don't even think that growing continually forever is even sustainable. All different kinds of things, trends, fads, all that stuff, even sports, they go up and down. It's not like every single sport grows its viewership year over year indefinitely. Sometimes you have up years, you have down years, just like businesses have up years and down years. And yeah, when you're running hot, it's amazing, but when you're going down, it's okay, then how do we bounce back from that? Maybe you need to make rule changes or format changes or all this stuff. And that's where both the LCS and the LEC are starting to get a little bit flat. I absolutely think this is in large part due to the format and due to franchising. I think franchising has been an absolute flop in both the LCS and the LEC. Franchising was pitched as this thing of like, how can we get sponsors and how can we get money if relegations are a thing? Sponsors aren't going to want to pay us a bunch of money if we could get relegated the next split, and then the sponsors are never going to see a return on their investment or whatever, which, it's fair. It makes some sense. But then at the same time, if you look at it, between the LCS and the LEC, we're at a point where maybe one or two teams are even profitable. Potentially at this point, no teams in the LCS and LEC are profitable, especially, if like crypto continues to crash and the global economies continue to crash and all this stuff. So has, franchising really brought in all this money that makes esports all of a sudden sustainable? Like no, it really hasn't. So I do think that's kind of been bullshit. But then also, the formats of both the LCS and the LEC, the fact that spring domestically and the spring regular season means absolutely nothing. Yeah, it gets you to MSI, but that's one team in every single region. For 90% of your team, spring means nothing. And if you're not like a top 3 or 4 team, so for 60% of your team, it means nothing. So like maybe there's 3 or 4 teams that are really vying for a legitimate shot at going to MSI. We have 2 international tournaments a year. MSI The format kind of sucks. It's pretty boring. It's not really all that exciting, but at least it's an international tournament. People still love it. And if you look at viewership from MSI, like 2018 to 19 to 21 to 22, there was an MSI in 2020. But for the most part, viewership has been growing. Even from, even over the last 3 or 4 years, viewership has still been growing despite the fact that viewership is declining in the LCS and LEC. Is that China and Korea carrying it? Is it just the fact that, hey, people will still tune into more exciting formats and stuff, but they won't tune into meaningless best of one regular season games where if you're a good team, you're going to make the playoffs for sure, especially in the LCS in the summer where 8 teams make the playoffs. Like, you literally could not make summer split regular season games less meaningful. They're best of ones. League of Legends is a game where the better team usually wins. Better team has a very, very high win rate against teams worse than them. And 80% of the teams make the playoffs anyway. And then once you get in the playoffs, it doesn't really matter. And so many teams never get to play internationally. Like, think about the LCS. How many teams have never played any international games at all? How many teams and fans of teams have never gotten to watch their team play in international competition or play anybody else from a different region or even like play in a best of 5 or a best of 3 or anything like that? The format we have right now with franchising and domestic regular seasons and even domestic playoffs a lot of the times, how many domestic playoff series are really, really good? How many of them are really must watch? Not very many. Also, definitely the problem in both the LEC and LCS right now is you have about 5 teams in each league that care, that spend money, that try to win, that try to make content, that try to build a brand, that try to make cool merch, all this kind of stuff. And then in both leagues, you really have 5 teams that don't care, that don't spend money, that don't have a big following, that don't try to do all these things. And that absolutely hurts the league because that's, 50% of your league isn't actively trying to grow. So you're going to plateau at some point. The 5 teams can't carry infinite growth forever. And then God forbid one of those 5 teams has a bad split or has a bad year, like, TSM having in the LCS right now. That's a big hit to the LCS when one of your 5 teams that's actually tries and fails. Now you only have 4 teams that are like really trying. You also have the fact that then you have the 5 teams that are trying and the 5 teams that aren't. They have to play each other. So you're going to end up with a lot of games in a lot of weeks where you have teams that no one cares about or teams that suck or whatever playing against some of your good teams. And if you're kind of like a fringe fan or you just want to watch the big games, the exciting games or whatever, and you see a team that's really good and really cares playing against somebody that's not really good, not interesting, and doesn't care, you're just not going to tune in. Now, obviously, with the LEC, there's a lot of comments and people saying, well, hey, just let K-Corp in, just let Koi in or whatever. And yeah, that does solve some of these issues. And in the short term and maybe even in the long term, viewership would absolutely jump. But then you still have the same things. Like, does this solve the issues of the format sucking? Does this solve the issues of so many meaningless games being played? Does this solve, all of these different issues and still the same problems with franchising? Like, hey, maybe bringing in K-Corp boosts our viewership for now, but what if K-Corp ends up having a bad split or having a bad year? Or what if in 2-3 years from now they kind of get tired of it? Or what if French fans aren't as excited to watch K-Corp play their, a best of one against Astralis for the 7th or 8th time after a couple of years? These things can absolutely happen. I did think this was very, very interesting because in this article, it actually talks about how so LEC summer 2022 has had so far 190,000 average viewers. Oh, this is in the first week. It had 190,000 average viewers, nearly 200,000 in its second week, and only 169,000 in its third one. These metrics decreased by 28.7%, 3%, and 12% respectively compared to the previous summer split, and 45%, 25%, 36% compared with the LEC spring split of 2022. It's interesting that the most successful week so far in the LEC summer was the second week, which is kind of interesting. In comparison with spring splits, the average viewers number in the LEC summer on YouTube dropped by 30%. Summer 2021 broadcast on Twitch dropped by 24%. So we're seeing drops on Twitch and YouTube. We're seeing drops across every language except for Hungarian, where they saw a 30% increase. And this is really interesting because the spring split, I believe, actually saw a little bit of a bump in viewership. I think that was for a couple of reasons. Fnatic had a super team; they're popular. Perks was back in Europe. Vitality had a super team. There was a lot of storylines and cool things going into the spring split, but then you see Fnatic kind of struggled. They flared out. Perks plays on kind of a middling team now, and you can see that stuff is still very storyline and narrative driven, and that stuff needs you to have huge off seasons, big spending, new players coming in. Like, you can't every split you can't have a Perks returning to Europe. Every split you can't have Fnatic forming a new super team. You need to those are nice jumps in viewership, and that happens in traditional sports as well, but you need to have more sustainable other other things going on. So yeah, I just did think that this was very, very interesting to see a story coming across my timeline about how the LEC is also struggling with some of these viewership issues, because again, it's been very, very public. The LCS's struggle and decline. And again, when you're looking at the LEC's numbers, we're talking 200,000, 150,000 viewers. That's not terrible by any means, but still, you know, right now, all of these teams, or most of these teams, are unprofitable. We need viewership to continue to grow. We need these things to continue to climb higher and higher. If things are starting to drop, and even if things are starting to plateau, overall, that could be a very, very bad sign for a lot of these teams, for a lot of these leagues. And yes, the easy answer is bring in Koi, bring in K-Corp, kick out Astralis, kick out SK, or do whatever you got to do. But I do think that those are maybe not like surefire long-term solutions. I think that there's a lot more things at play and a lot more things that Riot needs to do. And you know, if any sports league was seeing their viewership go down, they would be making changes immediately to the format, to the game, to whatever they had to do to stop their esport or their sport or their league or whatever from dying. So I really hope Riot does something pretty drastic going into 2023. But I really think the owners and in Riot's themselves greed of you know, doing the franchising and being able to sell franchise slots and being able to lock in their teams for a long time, you know, that maybe sounded good on paper, but so far it's played out pretty terribly in so many different ways. And now the long-term health and success of the league and even sustainability of the league, you know, it's now possible that, who knows, 5 years from now there might not even be an LCS. You know, these things are starting to come into question, and it's a damn shame, because esports have had their ups and downs, they've had their struggles, but League of Legends esports is really the closest we've ever been to a potential long-term solution in esports, and something that we could really grow into. And yeah, I mean, look at Valorant. You know, Riot is doing franchising over there, but they're doing it way, way, way differently. And even then, I think franchising a mistake in Valorant only 2 years into the competitive scene, or 3 years or whatever. But we'll have to wait and see. Either way, interesting news coming out about the LEC. I think it is pretty, it's not the end of the world. It's not like devastating news just yet, but it is concerning. But that's pretty much it for this video today, guys. Let me drop a like if you did enjoy it. I would appreciate that so much. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about anything we talked about in this video today. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Subscribe, stay up to date on all my latest content. Hope to catch you guys in the next one. But until then, peace.